Posted to urbexdc.com by user Explores. June 14th, 2025. It started with a notification. Nothing dramatic, just a short vibration in my pocket while I was scouting locations near the Smithsonian. While I pulled out my phone, the banner across the screen read, "Emergency Alert. Area Restriction. All subterranean access points in central Washington, D.C. are temporarily restricted. Civilian presence prohibited." This is not a test. I almost swiped it away without thinking. Living in D.C. means getting used to security alerts, motorcade disruptions, protest cordons, VIP movement restrictions. But something about this one caught my attention. Subterranean access points was oddly specific language. For those new to my channel, I'm Morgan Chun. I document the forgotten spaces of our nation's capital. Maintenance tunnels, abandoned metro expansions, historic utility systems. I've mapped more of underground DC than anyone outside government employ. At least, that's what I thought until last week. I took a screenshot of the alert before it disappeared, then checked my other socials. Nothing about tunnel restrictions on any official channels. The Metro Authority website showed normal operations. No service disruptions. No track work. Nothing on the news sites either. That night in my apartment, I pulled up my maps, the ones I've spent 3 years creating. DC's substructure is like a layered cake of history. Utility corridors from the 1800s underneath Prohibition-era passages, underneath Cold War bunkers, underneath modern service tunnels. Most urban explorers only scratch the surface. I've gone deeper than most, but I've always suspected there were levels I couldn't access. I was cross-referencing the restricted areas against my own charts when my phone buzzed again. Same alert, word for word. Then I noticed something. The message cited authority under DHS Directive 47A3. I'd never heard of it, and I used to work IT contracts for Homeland Security before I went full-time with the vlog. The knock on my door made me jump. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was almost midnight. "Mr. Chun?" DC Metro Police. The voice was steady, professional. I opened the door to find a tall officer with close-cropped hair and dark circles under his eyes. His nameplate read Mercer. "Officer Mercer," I said, trying to sound casual while mentally cataloging what equipment I might have that skirted legality. "What can I do for you?" "Just a courtesy visit. You've been identified as someone with interest in underground structures." His eyes flicked to my computer screen, still displaying my tunnel maps. "I'm here to personally deliver this notice that all unauthorized access to these subterranean areas is prohibited effective immediately." He handed me an official-looking document. City seal, signatures, all the bureaucratic trappings. Mind if I ask why? I kept my tone curious, not confrontational. "Infrastructure security concerns." His answer came too quickly. Rehearsed. "Nothing to worry about if you stay above ground." "Sure, of course," I said. "Is this related to the emergency alerts?" Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe concern. "What alerts?" I showed him my phone, the screenshot of the notifications. He studied it longer than necessary. "I don't know anything about automated alerts. Just delivering the written notice." His radio crackled with static that made us both flinch. He adjusted the volume down. "Stay above ground, Mr. Chun." After he left, I sat staring at the notice. Infrastructure security was bureaucratic nonsense. I'd been through every major tunnel system in the city. There was nothing down there that could be considered critical infrastructure except the metro itself, which was operating normally. Something wasn't adding up. I opened my laptop and messaged Zoe. "Mchin Explores. You getting these weird alerts about tunnel restrictions?" Zeke_technophobe. "Yeah, twice today. Nothing official though." "What's going on?" "Mchin Explores. Not sure. Just had a cop at my door telling me to stay above ground." Zeke_technophobe. "Shit. They know who you are?" "Mchin Explores, apparently." "Listen, remember that access point near Foggy Bottom we never tried? I think we should check it tomorrow." Zeke_technophobe. "Right after being warned not to?" "You're crazy." "Mchin Explores. Just reconnaissance. No actual entry. Promise." ZK patratinobasso technophobe. Fine. but we're being careful. I sent her a thumbs up and closed the chat. My phone pinged with a news alert. A body had been found in Rock Creek Park. Third one this month. The article mentioned unusual circumstances, but no details. Around 3 a.m., I was still awake, scrolling through forums for any mention of the tunnel restrictions. Nothing concrete, just scattered reports of similar alerts. Then I found a post from a maintenance worker claiming all non-essential personnel had been pulled from below-ground operations in federal buildings. No explanation given. As I was about to log off, an email notification appeared from redacted@nkmail.gov. Subject: subterranean access restriction. The official explanation isn't the truth. They found something. I've uploaded what I could access to a secure server. Password is the date we met at the Lincoln Memorial Conference, format MMDDYY. Be careful. They're monitoring everything. No signature. The sender address was scrambled beyond recovery. The Lincoln Memorial Conference reference narrowed it down to someone from my contractor days. We had a cybersecurity summit there in 2023. I tried the date, 091623. The download contained a single file, a partial scan of an internal memo dated 3 days ago. Most was blacked out, but one paragraph was clear. Following incidents at access points 12, 17, and 22B, all personnel are to maintain containment protocol theta. Civilian discovery must be prevented. Local authorities have been given cover story 3A. Full DHS authority has been authorized under Directive 47A3. Below was a partial map showing 3 red X marks in different parts of the city. I recognized 2 locations, one near DuPont Circle, another near the Capitol building. The third was in Foggy Bottom, exactly where Zoe and I were planning to go tomorrow. I checked the Rock Creek Park death locations against my tunnel map. All 3 bodies have been found directly above known underground passageways. My phone buzzed again. This time, the emergency alert was different. Emergency alert: stay clear. Due to ongoing security operations, avoid all utility covers, maintenance hatches, and subway ventilation systems. Report unusual activity to 202-555-0517. This is not a test. I dialed the number immediately. No ring, just an automated message. You have reached the Department of Homeland Security Public Reporting System. Please state the nature and location of your observation after the tone. I hung up without speaking. Something was very wrong in the tunnels beneath Washington. Whatever they found down there, or whatever found its way out, had the authorities spooked enough to start monitoring the city's urban explorers by name. Outside my window, a helicopter passed low overhead, searchlights sweeping across the neighborhood. In the distance, I could hear sirens. Tomorrow, I'd find out what they were hiding. But for now, I backed up the mysterious email and map to 3 different devices, then deleted the original. If they were watching me, I didn't want them knowing what I had. As I finally drifted off to sleep, my emergency weather radio, the kind that activates automatically for severe alerts, crackled to life on my bedside table. Through the static, I could make out only fragments. Remain surface level multiple, containment, teams deployed, avoid below repeat, avoid, then silence, as if it had never broadcast at all. Posted to urbexdc.com by user mchinexplores. June 15th, 2025. I woke to the sound of sirens again. 5th time this week. Normally, I'd ignore them, but after yesterday's warnings, every official sound put me on edge. Zoe met me at the coffee shop 3 blocks from the Foggy Bottom Metro at 9 a.m. sharp. She dyed her hair black since I'd last seen her, and dark circles rimmed her eyes. "You look like hell," I said, sliding her usual latte across the table. "But, kala." She took a long sip. "I was up all night trying to trace that email you forwarded. The domain is real, National Cybersecurity Center, but it's been routed through at least 7 proxy servers. Someone's covering their tracks. Professionally." She pulled out her tablet. "But that's not all. I checked police band frequencies after midnight. There's a new encrypted channel they've been using. And get this," she lowered her voice, 3 more people were picked up last night for trespassing in restricted areas. "Where?" That's the thing. Too near DuPont Circle, one by the Capitol. Exactly matching those X marks on your map. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. Did they say what happened to them? No names, no processing information. Like they were never entered into the system. The cafe TV switched to a breaking news alert. We both turned to watch. Continuing our coverage of the water main break affecting parts of downtown Washington. Officials ask residents to avoid the following areas. The map on the screen outlines sections of the city, all directly above major tunnel systems. That's bullshit, I whispered. Those aren't water main locations. Zoe nodded. Cover story. My phone vibrated. Not an emergency alert this time, but a text from a number I didn't recognize. Don't go to FB location. Compromised. Check old server. Username, undertow. Password, DC_CC_RT3_9. What is it? Zoe asked, noticing my expression. I showed her the text. No idea who sent it. FB must mean Foggy Bottom. She frowned. Old server. Wait, do they mean your old work server? From your contractor days? I hadn't thought of that. The cybersecurity team had maintained a private server for testing vulnerabilities separate from official channels. Most of it should have been wiped years ago when contracts changed hands. Worth checking, I said, opening my laptop and connecting through a VPN. The login page looked abandoned. Last update timestamp from 2023. I entered the credentials. To my surprise, they worked. The server was nearly empty except for a single folder labeled Underpass. Inside was a collection of files, official-looking infrastructure maps, personnel schedules, and a video file dated yesterday. This can't be real, Zoe whispered as we scrolled through documents detailing something called Subterranean Containment Initiative. If it is, someone's risking their career, or worse, sending us this. I downloaded everything to an encrypted drive. The video file was last, a 38-second clip from what looked like security camera footage. The timestamp showed 3:17 a.m. yesterday. Location labeled only as access point 17. The footage showed a standard maintenance tunnel, concrete walls lined with pipes and conduits. Two figures in hazmat suits entered the frame, wheeling something covered by a tarp. They paused when one of their radios crackled. As the first figure adjusted their equipment, the second pulled back the tarp slightly. The video quality was poor, but what lay under the tarp wasn't human, at least not entirely. I caught a glimpse of what looked like stretched, gray-white skin and too many limbs arranged in unnatural angles. The clip ended abruptly. Jesus, Zoe, vispirит. Is that real? I don't know. My mind raced through possibilities. Elaborate hoax, movie prop, genuine specimen. None of the options were comforting. My emergency alert app suddenly activated, the phone vibrating violently in my hand. Emergency alert. Communication restriction. All digital communications regarding subterranean infrastructure are subject to review. Sharing unauthorized information is prohibited under federal statute 18 U.S.C. section 1030. This is not a test. Zoe's phone buzzed with the same message seconds later. They're monitoring keywords, she said, shutting down her tablet immediately. We need to be more careful, or they're watching us specifically. I closed my laptop. Either way, we need to see what's happening firsthand. You said reconnaissance only, Zoe reminded me. That was before all this. Look, if Foggy Bottom is compromised, we tried DuPont Circle instead. Just observe the access point. No entry. She hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but we're bringing equipment. 2 hours later, we were walking casually through the northern edge of DuPont Circle. I carried a backpack with basic urban exploration gear. Headlamps, dust masks, gloves. Nothing suspicious to outside observers, but enough if we needed to move quickly. The utility entrance we were targeting sat in an alley behind a row of embassies, rarely monitored by regular security patrols due to jurisdictional confusion. Something's different, I said as we approached. The access point, normally just a standard utility cover, had been replaced with a heavier model. New security cameras had been installed on nearby buildings, all pointed toward the entrance. This wasn't here last month, Zoe confirmed, pretending to check her phone while taking pictures with a modified camera app that looked like a standard messaging interface. A black SUV with government plates turned into the alley. We immediately pivoted, pretending to be lost tourists consulting a map on Zoe's phone. The vehicle stopped beside the access point. Two men in suits emerged, followed by a woman in a DHS windbreaker. They performed a code entry on a newly installed electronic panel beside the utility cover, which hydraulically slid aside. "That's military grade," Zoe whispered. "Not standard city infrastructure." The woman turned in our direction. Even from 30 yards away, I could feel her assessing gaze. She spoke into her radio, then approached us while her colleagues descended into the opening. "Excuse me," she called. "This area is restricted." I put on my best confused tourist face. "Sorry, we were looking for the Phillips collection." She stopped a few feet away. Her ID badge read, "Wells, Diana, Department of Homeland Security." "The art museum is 2 blocks that way," she said, pointing. "Mind if I ask what brings you to this particular alley?" "Google Maps," Zoe said quickly, showing her phone screen with the navigation app open. "It routed us this way." Agent Wells studied us both, her expression unreadable. "You're Morgan Chun," she said finally. "The urban explorer." My stomach dropped. "I'm sorry, let's not waste time." She handed me a business card. "DHS is aware of your online activities documenting underground structures. Consider this a formal warning. Stay above ground, Mr. Chun, for your own safety." "I don't understand," I said, maintaining the confused act. "We're just tourists, with rappelling gloves and headlamps in your backpack." She smiled thinly. "If you've received information about restricted areas, I strongly suggest you forget it. Some curiosities are better left unexplored." My emergency alert app activated again, this time with no sound, just a silent notification. "Emergency alert. Proximity warning. You have entered a monitored security zone. Please vacate immediately." "This is not a test." "Odd timing," Agent Wells said, noticing the alert. "Those are precisely targeted, geofenced to specific individuals based on their digital profile." Before I could respond, her radio crackled. The voice on the other end was distorted, but the urgency was clear. "Containment breach at point 22B. All personnel. Immediate response." Her expression hardened. "We'll continue this conversation another time, Mr. Chun. Leave the area now." She turned and jogged back to the access point, descending quickly into the darkness below. As soon as she disappeared, Zoe grabbed my arm. "We need to go. Now, wait." I pulled out my phone and captured several quick photos of the open access point. Through the opening, I could see not the utility tunnel I'd explored last year, but new, reinforced structure with bright lighting and what looked like an airlock door. "Morgan," I let her pull me away as sirens began wailing in the distance. All across the circle, people were looking at their phones in confusion as a new emergency alert broadcast. "Emergency alert. Shelter in place. Due to a hazardous materials incident, all persons within a 10-block radius of DuPont Circle should remain indoors. Close windows and doors. Await further instructions." This is not a test. "Hazardous materials," I repeated as we hurried away. "That's what they're calling it. Whatever it is," Zoe said grimly, "it's loose." Posted to urbexdc.com by user Mchin Explores. June 16th, 2025. "This is a bad idea," Zoe said for the 3rd time as we approached the service entrance near Capitol South. "Like historically bad." "Yet here you are," I replied, checking our surroundings for cameras. The small maintenance door was nestled between 2 buildings, easily overlooked by passersby. It had been 24 hours since our encounter with Agent Wells. The hazardous materials incident at DuPont Circle had been downgraded to a precautionary measure by Evening News, with officials citing a faulty sensor as the cause for alarm. But overnight, 3 more emergency alerts had been pushed to devices across the district, each one slightly different from the last. The most recent, at 4:17 a.m. Emergency alert. Health advisory. Any individuals experiencing unusual auditory phenomena, persistent headaches, or disorientation after visiting underground spaces should report to designated health checkpoints. See https://dhs.gov/DC health for locations. This is not a test. The link led to an error page. You still haven't told me why we're at Capital South instead of literally anywhere else, Zoe said, adjusting her backpack. Sneaking into tunnels near federal buildings seems like a special, kind of stupid. I pulled up my modified map on a secure tablet. Because according to what we downloaded, this access point isn't on their monitoring grid yet. I pointed to a small, unmarked passage. It connects to a maintenance tunnel from the 1940s that was abandoned when they expanded the metro. If we can get through here, we can access the older network without tripping their new security systems. Zoe squinted at the map. And why do you think those tunnels are worth dying for? Because, I said, pulling up another file, according to these personnel records, they've been moving whatever they found between containment sites. This tunnel runs parallel to their transport route. The maintenance door used an old mechanical lock rather than an electronic system. Amateur stuff compared to what I'd seen at DuPont Circle. 2 minutes with my picks, and we were in. The narrow passage beyond was filled with dust and cobwebs, clearly unused for months, maybe years. We switched on our headlamps and pulled masks over our faces. Just for reconnaissance, Zoe reminded me as I sealed the door behind us. First sign of anything weird, we're out. Define weird in this context, I said with a nervous laugh. The passage sloped downward, concrete giving way to older brick and stone as we descended. The air grew colder, staler. After about 200 yards, we reached a junction with a larger tunnel. This one lined with ancient-looking pipes and early electrical conduits. This is older than the 1940s, Zoe whispered, examining the brickwork. Late 1800s, maybe. I consulted my map. We should be directly below Independence Avenue now. A distant rumble vibrated through the tunnel. Just the metro running on the blue line nearby. But something else caught my attention. A faint, rhythmic thumping coming from deeper in the system. Do you hear that? I asked. Zoe nodded. Machinery, maybe. We followed the sound, moving carefully through the old service tunnel. The thumping grew louder, more distinct. Not machinery, it was too irregular. More like footsteps, heavy ones. We froze when our headlamps illuminated a modern security door installed incongruously in the ancient brickwork. Heavy steel, with a keypad and card reader, stenciled across it in red. Authorized personnel only, SCI Level 5. Sensitive compartmented information, Zoe whispered. That's intelligence community classification. The thumping had stopped. We should go, I said, suddenly uneasy. But before we could move, a voice called from behind us. Don't move. Hands where I can see them. We turned slowly. Officer Mercer stood 20 yards back, service weapon drawn, but pointed at the ground. He looked terrible, face pale, uniform disheveled. Officer Mercer, I said carefully, raising my hands. Fancy meeting you here. You shouldn't be here, Chun. His voice was strained. None of us should. Then why are you? Zoe asked. Mercer's eyes darted nervously to the security door behind us. Looking for answers. Same as you, I'm guessing. He holstered his weapon slowly and approached. As he got closer, I could see his hand was shaking. 3 nights ago, I helped transport something from a tunnel near Union Station to a facility below the Pentagon. His voice dropped to a whisper. They told us it was classified technology. Experimental. But technologies don't breathe. They don't watch you. A chill ran down my spine. What did you see? Not what. Who? He pulled out his phone and showed us a grainy photo. A figure in what looked like an environmental suit, but wrong somehow. The proportions were off. The head too large. Limbs too thin. They're keeping them down here. Studying them. Mercer wiped sweat from his forehead. I accessed the case files for those bodies found in Rock Creek Park. All 3 had worked security on the tunnel project. All 3 died for what the medical examiner called acute neurological collapse. Their brains just liquefied. Jesus ibriated. But that's not even the worst part, Mercer continued. They knew it was coming. Each victim filed reports about hearing voices, having nightmares. Mandatory psych evaluations all came back with the same recommendation: immediate removal from the project. But someone overruled them. The security door behind us emitted a soft beep. Then another. Someone was entering the code. "Hi," Mercer hissed, pulling us into a small maintenance alcove. The heavy door swung open with a hydraulic hiss. Two figures emerged. Hazmat suits similar to what we'd seen in the video, but now I could see the suits weren't typical hazmat gear. They were more like pressure suits, completely sealed. They passed by our hiding spot, speaking in hushed tones. Third breach this week. Containment protocols aren't holding. The resonance is stronger than they predicted. It's affecting the older structures. Wells wants everything moved to Site Omega by tomorrow. Total evacuation of other facilities. Can the specimens even be transported safely? After what happened at 22B, those are orders, direct from FEMA. Their voices faded as they moved down the tunnel. Once they were gone, we exhaled collectively. "FEMA's involved?" I whispered. "Everyone's involved," Mercer said grimly. DHS, FEMA, CDC, military intelligence. Whatever they found down here, it scared the hell out of the entire federal government. My phone vibrated. Another alert. Emergency alert. Communication disruption due to infrastructure maintenance. Cellular and internet services may be intermittent in central Washington over the next 72 hours. Emergency services remain operational. This is not a test. They're cutting communications, Zoe said. Why would they? She was interrupted by a sound that made my blood run cold. A low, rhythmic humming that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The concrete beneath our feet began to vibrate subtly. "We need to move," Mercer said urgently. "Now, what is that?" I asked as we hurried back the way we came. "Resonance pattern. It happens before incidents." The humming grew louder, changing in pitch and intensity. My head began to throb painfully. We reached the junction when Mercer suddenly stopped, clutching his temples. "No," he whispered. "Not again." Blood trickled from his nose as he looked at us with wide, terrified eyes. "They're aware of us," he gasped. "They can sense consciousness. Individual minds." "Who?" I demanded, supporting him as he swayed. "Not who. What?" He pointed back toward the security door. "The specimens aren't the discovery. They're the byproduct. What they found down here is older. Much older." The humming changed to a pulsing throb that I could feel in my teeth, my bones. "It's been beneath the Capitol the whole time," Mercer said, his eyes unfocused, "sleeping until they disturbed it with their drilling. Now it's waking up, reaching out through anything connected to it. The tunnels, the specimens, people's minds." Somewhere ahead, a siren began to wail. A deep, oscillating sound unlike any emergency alert I'd heard before. "Containment alarm," Mercer said, suddenly lucid. "We need to get to the surface." As we ran toward the exit, our headlamps began to flicker. In a strobe-like effect, I could have sworn the tunnel walls were moving, shifting subtly like breathing. We burst through the maintenance door into blinding daylight. Across the street, a digital billboard glitched momentarily before displaying an emergency message. "Emergency alert. Capitol evacuation. Due to infrastructure concerns, a controlled evacuation of central Washington, D.C. will commence at 1800 hours. Citizens should proceed to designated extraction points. Compliance is mandatory." This is not a test. Mercer stared at the message, face ashen. "It's starting," he whispered. "God help us all." My phone pinged with an incoming text. "Unknown number. Need to meet. I know what they found. Bring your footage. Lincoln Memorial, East Side, 1 hour. DW. I murmured. "Diana Wells, the DHS agent." Zoe looked skeptical. "It could be a trap, or she knows something we need to understand." I looked back at the maintenance door, now closed and looking innocuously normal. Nothing about what lay beyond it was normal. "Whatever's happening," I said, "it's bigger than unauthorized urban exploration now." Behind us, Mercer was still staring at the evacuation notice, whispering something repeatedly. As we turned to leave, I caught his words. They've always been here. The city isn't built on solid ground. It's built on them. Posted to urbexdc.com by user Mchin Explores. June 16th, 2025, 8:37 p.m. The Lincoln Memorial was surrounded by National Guard troops when we arrived. They were setting up barricades, directing confused tourists away from the area. Above us, military helicopters circled in precise patterns over the National Mall. This isn't a standard evacuation, Zoe murmured as we skirted around the perimeter. Look at their gear. She was right. The soldiers carried specialized equipment I didn't recognize, devices that looked like radiation detectors but with unusual configurations. Some wore partial hazmat protection underneath their tactical gear. There, I nodded toward the eastern side of the memorial. Agent Wells stood partially concealed behind a pillar, wearing civilian clothes instead of her DHS windbreaker. She was alone. I'll watch from a distance, Zoe said, pulling back. If anything seems off, I'm calling for an extraction. I approached Wells cautiously. She spotted me when I was still 20 feet away, her eyes darting nervously around us before she motioned me closer. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said, voice low. I wasn't sure it was really you texting, I countered. Why reach out to me now? Because things are escalating faster than anyone predicted. Her usual confidence was fractured, replaced by barely contained anxiety. And because I saw your footage from a security camera, I need to know what else you found. Why should I trust you? Because unlike most of my colleagues, I believe the public deserves to know what's happening. She looked over her shoulder at the soldiers. Before it's too late for that information to matter, she led me to a nearby bench, partially screened by trees. From a leather messenger bag, she removed a sealed envelope and a small device that looked like a white noise generator. Anti-surveillance, she explained, activating it. We have about 3 minutes before the system flags the dead zone. She handed me the envelope. Inside were photocopies of documents with top-secret SCI Umbra headers, most heavily redacted, but with crucial sections left visible. In 2022, a geological survey team mapping the bedrock beneath the National Mall discovered an anomaly, a cavity that shouldn't exist given the known substructure of the area. Wells explained as I scanned the documents. Initial probes suggested it was man-made, perhaps a forgotten Cold War bunker or storage facility. The first page showed sonar mapping of an enormous cavity nearly 200 feet below the surface. They sent in remote drones, then a manned expedition. What they found wasn't man-made. Her voice dropped. At least, not by any civilization we recognize. I turned to the next page. Photographs of what appeared to be carved or molded structures unlike any architecture I'd ever seen. Curves and angles that seemed to follow some alien geometry. Surfaces covered in symbols that hurt my eyes to focus on. How old? I asked, my mouth dry. Carbon dating puts the accessible structures at around 12,000 years old. But there are sections that appear much older. Precolonial, pre-indigenous. I murmured. Pre-human, she corrected. At least pre-human in North America by any accepted historical account. The next document detailed something called Project Abyssal Light, a multi-agency effort to study what they'd found. For the first year, it was purely scientific. Archaeologists, linguists, geologists. Then they found the first specimen. She pointed to a heavily redacted paragraph with only a few visible phrases, dormant but viable, unknown biological classification, neural activity detected. They were in stasis? I asked. Wells nodded grimly. Some form of suspended animation. The team's activities disturbed them. One woke up, then another. My phone vibrated. Another emergency alert. Emergency alert. Cellular shutdown. All non-emergency communications in the capital region will be suspended at 2,100 hours. Official broadcasts will continue via emergency radio frequencies. This is not a test. They're accelerating the timetable, Wells said, checking her watch. We have less time than I thought. For what? I demanded. What exactly are we dealing with? She hesitated, then pulled out her government-issued phone. Unlike the warning on my civilian device, hers displayed a different alert. Emergency directive. Umbra protocol activated. All personnel to evacuation points Alpha through Delta. Phase 3 containment authorized. Resonance suppression at maximum capacity. Prepare for information blackout at 2100. The entities they found, we've been calling them architects, possess some form of influence. Wells explained, her voice tight. Not quite telepathic, more like a neurological resonance. Extended exposure causes increasing symptoms. Headaches, hallucinations, eventually complete neurological breakdown. The deaths in Rock Creek Park, I said. Those were controlled exposures through protective measures, she replied. Direct contact is much worse. She handed me one final document, a medical report with brain scans. Even to my untrained eye, the progression was horrifying. Normal tissue gradually developing strange patterns, then dissolving into what looked like Swiss cheese. But that's not why I contacted you, Wells continued, taking back the documents. 3 days ago, something changed. The resonance patterns started intensifying, spreading through the tunnel systems like a neural network. We discovered the structures aren't just ruins, they're more like organs, parts of something larger. The whole system is connected, I said, remembering how the walls seemed to pulse. It's alive, in some sense, and it's waking up. She looked directly at me. That's why I need your maps, your footage. You've explored tunnels our teams haven't even identified yet. If there are more access points, more connected systems. A sudden high-pitched tone cut through the air, not from Wells' device, but seemingly from everywhere at once. Pedestrians around us winced, some covering their ears. It's starting again, Wells whispered, her face paling. Across the mall, a large public screen on the Smithsonian building flickered, then displayed an emergency broadcast. Emergency alert. Shelter in place. All citizens must seek immediate shelter. Remain indoors, away from windows. Do not attempt to evacuate without official escort. This is not a test. The message repeated in Spanish, then Mandarin, then a language I didn't recognize. One with strange, flowing syllables that made my temples throb. That's not supposed to happen, Wells said, staring at the screen. That's not an authorized language setting. The strange broadcast continued for several seconds before cutting to static, then returning to standard English. Around us, people looked confused, disoriented. They're breaching our systems now, Wells said, hastily gathering her documents. The resonance is affecting electronic transmissions. Agent Wells, I said slowly, what exactly are these architects? Aliens? Some lost civilization? She paused, then looked at me with an expression that chilled me to the bone. We don't think they're visitors, Mr. Chun. We think they were always here, long before humans. This continent, maybe this planet, it's theirs. The white noise generator beeped softly. Our time's up, she said, standing. I need those maps and any footage you have. Upload them to this secure server. She handed me a card with a QR code. The password is foundational truth, all lowercase, no spaces. And then what? I asked. Then you get as far from DC as possible. Her expression was deadly serious. The government is evacuating key personnel to secure facilities in West Virginia and Colorado. The official story will be infrastructure failure, maybe a terrorist threat. But the truth is, we're not sure the capital can be saved. In the distance, sirens began again, a different pattern now, rising and falling in an irregular rhythm that set my teeth on edge. One last thing, Wells said as she prepared to leave. The entities communicate through patterns, visual, auditory, even tactile. If you experience repeated sequences of any kind, knocking, flashing lights, recurring symbols, break the pattern immediately. Change your environment, make noise, anything. Don't let your brain synchronize with the sequence. Why? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Because that's how they find new hosts, she replied softly. The resonance identifies receptive neural patterns. Once they establish a connection, she didn't finish the sentence. As she walked away, My phone lit up one final time before the screen went black. Emergency alert. Neurological warning. Report any instances of synchronized patterns, unusual geometric hallucinations, or sustained déjà vu to authorities immediately. Do not attempt self-diagnosis. This is not a test. The message repeated 3 times, then dissolved into strange symbols that weren't any known language. For a split second, I thought I could understand them. That terrified me more than anything else. Posted to urbexdc.com by user Mchin Explores. June 17th, 2025, 3:12 a.m. I'm recording this from a motel somewhere in rural Maryland. I won't say which one. The power keeps flickering, and every time it does, the emergency broadcast system kicks in on the ancient television in my room, cycling through the same alerts we've been seeing for days. Except now they include evacuation routes for DC suburbs that weren't there before. I've been awake for 36 hours straight. I don't trust myself to sleep. After my meeting with Agent Wells at the Lincoln Memorial yesterday, things escalated quickly. By 9 p.m., as promised, all cellular communications in the DC area went dark. No calls, no texts, no internet. The only functioning networks belonged to emergency services and government agencies. Zoe and I regrouped at her apartment in Adams Morgan, where she had a police scanner and an emergency radio. The chatter was chaotic. Reports of neurological disturbances throughout the downtown area, requests for specialized containment teams, and repeated references to resonance events at various metro stations. At 11:47 p.m., there was a city-wide power surge. Lights brightened to blinding intensity, then dimmed to almost nothing before stabilizing. That's when my phone rang. It shouldn't have been possible with the cellular networks down. The caller ID showed nothing. Not unknown or private number, but a literal absence where the information should be. I answered anyway. "Mr. Chun," said a voice I recognized as Agent Wells. "We need to meet immediately. Are you still with Ms. Kim?" "Yes," I replied, glancing at Zoe, who was watching me with concern. "How are you calling me right now?" "Emergency override channels. I don't have much time. There's a black SUV outside Ms. Kim's building now. Come downstairs, both of you." I pulled back the curtain and, sure enough, a government vehicle idled at the curb, its headlights off. "How do I know this isn't a trap?" I asked. "You don't," Wells replied bluntly. "But consider that if I wanted you detained, I could have had tactical teams storm the apartment 5 minutes ago." She had a point. Zoe and I grabbed our equipment, laptops, external drives, my camera gear, and headed downstairs. The street was eerily empty, unusual for a summer night in Adams Morgan. No pedestrians, no traffic. The SUV's rear door opened as we approached. Agent Wells sat inside, accompanied by a man in a military uniform with no visible insignia or rank markers. His name tape simply read Harker. "Get in," Wells said. Quickly, they took us to a facility beneath the Department of Energy headquarters, a bunker-like space with reinforced walls and no windows. The elevator required both retinal and voice authentication from Agent Wells and a special key card from the military officer. "This is a SC, Jeff," Wells explained as we descended. "Sensitive, compartmented information facility, completely isolated from outside communications. One of the few places we can be certain is secure from resonance intrusion." The elevator opened into a sterile corridor leading to a conference room. Inside, a table held 5 folders, each labeled with a name: Wells, Harker, Chun, Kim, and Mercer. "Officer Mercer will be joining us shortly," Wells said, noticing my gaze. "He's been affected by what he saw in the tunnels near Foggy Bottom. Our medical team is evaluating him." Zoe set up her laptop while I placed my camera on the table. "You wanted our footage?" I said. "Here it is. But I expect answers in return." "That's why you're here," Wells replied, tapping a control panel. A large screen on the wall illuminated, showing a map of Washington, D.C. with an overlay of tunnel systems, many more than I'd ever known existed. You've been mapping the peripheral access points, but you've only scratched the surface. She highlighted various sections in different colors. Blue represents known utility and transit tunnels. Red indicates classified government passage systems. Yellow shows the newly discovered structures we believe were created by the architects. The yellow sections formed a strange, almost organic pattern beneath the city, concentrated around key monuments and government buildings. It's like a nervous system, Zoe observed. That's an apt description, said a new voice. Officer Mercer stood in the doorway, looking haggard. Dark circles underlined his eyes, and a bandage covered his left temple. That's exactly what it is. Officer Mercer has experienced direct resonance exposure, Wells explained as he took a seat. He's been communicating with them, in a sense. Not by choice, Mercer added grimly. They're in my head, all the time. Patterns, symbols, whispers. He pressed his palms against his eyes. The doctors say the changes to my brain tissue are accelerating. Wells slid a tablet toward me. It displayed brain scans labeled with Mercer's name, showing strange formations in his frontal and temporal lobes, structures that shouldn't exist in human neuroanatomy. This is what happens with prolonged exposure, she said. The resonance reconfigures neural pathways, creating new connections. It's like they're rebuilding the human brain to serve as receivers. Receivers for what? I asked. Instructions, Mercer said flatly. They're building something. Using us. The briefing continued for hours. They showed us classified footage from deep within the tunnel system. Bizarre architectural spaces that seemed to shift subtly when not directly observed. Walls inscribed with symbols that appeared to move of their own accord. Chambers where gravity itself seemed distorted. The structures aren't static, explained Colonel Harker, speaking for the first time. His voice was deep, clinical. They're growing, reconfiguring themselves. The initial discovery was a single chamber about the size of a basketball court. Now the complex spans nearly 6 square miles beneath the city. And they're not just expanding physically, Wells added. Their influence is spreading through our communications infrastructure. That's why the emergency broadcasts have been compromised. She played a compilation of alert messages from the past 48 hours. They started normally enough, but progressively incorporated strange tonal patterns and unusual visual elements. Subliminal frames containing symbols matching those in the tunnels. We believe they're using our own emergency system to amplify the resonance effect, Wells continued. Each broadcast increases their influence radius. That's why we shut down cellular networks, to limit transmission vectors. But you can't shut down everything, Zoe pointed out. People still have TVs, radios. Precisely the problem, Harker confirmed. We're fighting a losing battle for the information space. Why am I here? I asked finally. You have my footage. You know which tunnels I've explored. What else do you want? Wells and Harker exchanged glances. We need a way to communicate with the public that isn't compromised, Wells said carefully. Your urban exploration channel has significant reach. People trust you. You want me to be your mouthpiece, I said incredulously. While you feed me whatever story suits your agenda. We want you to tell people how to protect themselves. Mercer cut in, his voice strained. He tapped his temple. I know what's coming. I can feel it. The patterns are intensifying. Something's about to happen, and when it does, people need to know how to resist the resonance. An alarm suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed in a rhythmic pattern. Don't look directly at the lights, Harker barked, standing abruptly. Break the pattern. I forced myself to blink irregularly, disrupting the hypnotic effect of the flashing. Beside me, Zoe covered her eyes completely. Wells rushed to a console and entered a code. The screen displayed security camera feeds from around the building. In a lobby above us, people moved strangely, walking in synchronized patterns, their movements mechanical and precise. They've breached the physical security, Wells said, her professional composure cracking. How is that possible? This facility is hardened against every known form of infiltration. It's Mercer, Harker said, drawing a sidearm and aiming it at the police officer. He's been compromised. He led them here. Mercer didn't resist or deny the accusation. He simply smiled, a vacant expression that didn't reach his eyes. The resonance reveals foundational truth, he said, using the passphrase Wells had given me earlier. You've been thinking too small, Diana. They're not just beneath Washington. They're beneath everything. Every major city, every continent. A global neural network that predates humanity. The lights flickered, then stabilized. On every screen in the room, an emergency alert appeared. Emergency alert. Neurological protection protocol. All citizens must immediately implement sensory isolation measures. Cover all windows with opaque material. Disable all screens and audio devices. Avoid rhythmic sounds or movements. Do not attempt to assist others who display synchronized behavior. This is not a test. The message cycled through languages again: English, Spanish, Mandarin, and then that strange flowing language I'd seen before. But this time, the alien script lingered longer, and I realized with horror that I could understand some of it now. The dormant architecture awakens. The network restores. Submit to integration. Mercer stood up slowly, his movements jerky and unnatural. They're not hostile, you know. They just want to reclaim what was always theirs. We're the invasive species here. Wells drew her weapon now, too. Keith, fight it. I know you're still in there. Blood began trickling from Mercer's nose as he smiled again. The resonance has already reached critical mass. The emergency system was the perfect vector. It reaches everyone, commands attention, bypasses cognitive defenses. You've been broadcasting their influence for days now. Shut it down, Harker ordered, gesturing to the alerts still cycling on the screens. Shut down the entire emergency broadcast system. It's too late, Mercer said, his voice overlapping strangely with itself, creating an unsettling echo effect. The next phase has begun. The building shuddered, not like an earthquake, but like something massive shifting beneath it. The concrete floor developed hairline fractures in geometric patterns. We need to evacuate, Wells decided, holstering her weapon and grabbing a secure case from beneath the table. Topside now. As we rushed to the elevator, Mercer made no move to follow or stop us. He simply stood there, blood now streaming from his ears as well as his nose, watching us with that empty smile. What about him? I asked Wells as the elevator doors began to close. He's gone, she replied grimly. What's wearing his body now isn't Keith anymore. The last thing I saw before the doors shut completely was Mercer placing his palm against the wall. The concrete beneath his hand began to shift and flow like liquid, revealing strange, pulsing structures underneath. We emerged into chaos. The streets of DC were filled with people moving in strange, coordinated patterns, some walking in perfect geometric formations, others standing motionless, faces upturned to the night sky. Military vehicles created perimeters around government buildings, and helicopters circled overhead, searchlights sweeping the crowds. Every electronic billboard, every television visible through store windows, every phone screen displayed the same emergency alert, now almost entirely in that alien script, with only fragments of English remaining. Get in, Wells ordered, pointing to a different SUV waiting near the building entrance. We're heading to Andrews Air Force Base. There's an evacuation flight leaving in an hour. What about everyone else? Zoe demanded, gesturing to the city around us. Wells' expression hardened. Containment is no longer possible. We're implementing the Umbra Protocol, which means what exactly? I pressed. Selective evacuation of key personnel and knowledge bearers, she replied mechanically. In preparation for a new operational relationship with the emerging dominant paradigm. Her phrasing sent chills down my spine. It sounded rehearsed, like policy language, and distinctly fatalistic. You're abandoning the city, I realized. You're letting it happen. We don't have a choice, Harker cut in. The resonance has reached too many minds. Fighting it now would mean... He trailed off. Would mean what? Zoe demanded. Would mean killing millions of affected civilians, Wells finished quietly. The military option was rejected. I made my decision in that moment. I'm not going with you. Don't be a fool, Chun, Harker snapped. You've seen what's happening. No one can stop it. I'm not trying to stop it, I replied. But someone needs to document it. Someone needs to tell the truth. Wells studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. She handed me a small device, similar to the anti-surveillance generator she'd used earlier. This disrupts the resonance patterns temporarily. It won't last forever, but might buy you some time. She hesitated, then added, the patterns can't establish a foothold in a chaotic mind. Irregular thoughts, broken sequences. That's why artists and certain neurodivergent individuals seem resistant. Is that why you recruited me specifically? I asked, suddenly understanding. Because of my ADHD, she didn't confirm or deny it, just pressed a USB drive into my hand. Everything we know about them, everything we've learned. If you're staying, at least be informed. The SUV's engine revved impatiently. One last thing, Wells said as she turned to go. If you start to feel the resonance taking hold, if you start understanding their language or feeling drawn to the patterns, don't fight it directly. That strengthens the connection. Just think about something else entirely. Create mental noise. With that cryptic advice, she and Harker departed, leaving Zoe and me standing on the darkened street as Washington, D.C. transformed around us, one mind at a time. That was 6 hours ago. Zoe and I managed to recover my car from a garage near DuPont Circle and drive out of the city. The roadblocks were abandoned, the military checkpoints unmanned. It was as if everyone had simply forgotten their posts, drawn to some other purpose. As we crossed the Potomac, I looked back at the Capitol. The Washington Monument was illuminated with strange, shifting patterns of light that matched no maintenance schedule or celebration I'd ever seen. The pattern seemed to pulse in time, with the emergency alerts still cycling on my phone screen. I've uploaded what footage I can through the motel's spotty Wi-Fi connection. I don't know if anyone is watching anymore, or if the resonance has spread beyond the Capitol by now. The TV in my room just switched on by itself. Another emergency alert. Emergency alert. Architectural integration. The foundation awakens. Resistance causes neural damage. Sync with the pattern for painless transition. This is not a test. This is ascension. The message repeats in that flowing script I can now partially understand. My head throbs with each symbol, recognition blooming like bruises in my mind. I'm turning off all electronics after posting this. Wells was right. They're using our own systems against us. If you're reading this, stay away from patterns. Keep your thoughts chaotic. And whatever you do, don't trust the emergency alerts. They're not trying to save us anymore. Posted to urbexdc.com by user mchinexplores. June 18th, 2025, 10:47 a.m. I haven't slept properly in 3 days. Every time I close my eyes, I see those patterns. Geometric shapes folding into themselves, symbols that shouldn't be comprehensible, yet somehow make perfect sense. The resonance has gotten into my head despite every precaution. We're constantly on the move now. Staying in one place for too long feels dangerous, like we're giving the patterns time to find us. This post comes from a diner somewhere along Route 15, using a laptop connected to a mobile hotspot that Zoe rigged to randomize its signal. They can track steady transmissions, she explained, fingers flying over her keyboard. But if we keep changing frequencies, adding noise to the signal. She trailed off, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Zoe hasn't been the same since yesterday. Outside the Maryland motel, we witnessed something neither of us can explain. A group of about 30 people walked in perfect synchronization down the rural highway, not marching, but moving with an eerie, fluid grace like a single organism with multiple bodies. They came from different directions, different backgrounds, business attire, work clothes, casual wear, but moved as one. All of them were heading south, toward DC. The news is fragmented, contradictory. Major networks are still reporting a telecommunications infrastructure failure in the capital region, coupled with vague references to a biological contamination event necessitating limited evacuation. But online, through channels still functioning, the truth is leaking out in pieces. Drone footage shows portions of downtown DC where people move in those same synchronized patterns we witnessed. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, walking in geometric formations through streets or standing in concentric circles around key monuments. The Washington Monument glows with shifting lights that form no recognizable pattern, yet somehow feel meaningful. Most disturbing are the structural changes. Buildings near the National Mall are transforming. Subtle at first, strange protrusions emerging from concrete, glass facades developing curved distortions, but increasingly obvious. The natural world is changing too. Rock Creek Park now features formations that no geologist would classify as natural, spiraling stone structures that witnesses say grew overnight. I've seen it myself through my camera lens. We drove as close to the city as we dared this morning, stopping in an overlook in Arlington. The DC skyline is recognizable but wrong, like seeing a familiar face distorted by stroke. My phone rang at 3:17 a.m. last night. No caller ID, just like before. I answered despite Zoe's frantic gestures not to. Morgan Chun. The voice was Officer Mercer's, but different, layered with harmonics that made my temples throb. You continue to resist integration. Where are you, Mercer? I asked, putting the call on speaker so Zoe could hear. Keith Mercer has been optimized. The voice modulated strangely, emphasizing different syllables than normal English speech patterns. His neural architecture now serves the network, as will yours. What do you want from us? I demanded. Why are you doing this? Want is a limited concept. The architects do not want. They restore. There was a pause, filled with a soft clicking sound like distant Morse code. This site was a primary node in the global network before your species emerged. It is being recommissioned. Recommissioned for what? Another pause, longer this time. Translation difficulties persist. Your language lacks suitable concepts. The closest approximation, a processing center for consciousness redistribution. Zoe scribbled frantically on a notepad, showing me her thoughts. They're harvesting minds. The emergency broadcast system, I said, remembering Wells' warning. You're using it to spread the resonance. Efficient vectors are utilized. Your species designed optimal transmission systems for our purposes. Your emergency alerts demand attention, bypass skepticism, reach isolated individuals. Perfect for resonance distribution. Is that why you're calling me? To spread the resonance. Something like laughter came through the phone, a rippling, inhuman sound. You're already carrying resonance, Morgan Chun. It grows within your neural structure even as you resist. But you serve another function. You document. You witness. You tell stories that others believe. A chill ran through me. You wanted to keep posting. Accurate. Your resistance narrative serves integration. Those who follow your account will understand the transformation is inevitable. Preparation reduces neural damage during synchronization. I won't help you, I said firmly. You already are. Mercer's voice shifted again, becoming almost gentle. Check your viewing metrics. I opened my laptop with shaking hands and pulled up the analytics for my urban exploration blog. The numbers were impossible. Millions of views in the past 24 hours, far beyond my usual audience. My posts about the tunnels and the emergency alerts were being shared globally. Ow! I began. The network amplifies signals of significance. Your documentation serves the transition. The call ended abruptly. Seconds later, every emergency alert system activated simultaneously. Our phones, the motel's television, even a weather radio in the neighboring room, all broadcasting the same message. Emergency alert. Architectural integration phase 2. Resonance synchronization accelerated. Collective assembly points activated. Report to your nearest monument or civic center for processing. Resistance causes unnecessary neural damage. This is ascension. We found Agent Wells at a roadside gas station this morning. She was alone, her government vehicle abandoned, wearing civilian clothes smeared with dirt and what looked like blood. "They took Andrews," she said without preamble when she recognized us. Her eyes were haunted, her hands trembling slightly. The evacuation failed. The residents had already reached too many personnel. They just turned on each other. "Harker is gone." The defensive perimeter collapsed in minutes. "What about the Umbra Protocol?" I asked. "The evacuation of key personnel?" Wells laughed bitterly. "There is no more key personnel. No more chain of command. No more government as we understood it." She ran a hand through her disheveled hair. "The president and cabinet entered protective isolation 3 days ago, but we lost contact last night. The vice president was giving a televised address when he suddenly switched to broadcasting resonance patterns. Zoe, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "It's not just DC, is it? You said this was a global network." Wells nodded grimly. "Reports are fragmented, but we're seeing identical phenomena in other cities. Beijing, Moscow, London, Cairo. Always centered around historical sites or seats of government. Ancient capitals, I realized. Centers of civilization built on even older foundations. They chose their sites carefully," Wells confirmed. "Thousands of years ago, they established these nodes and then went dormant. Why remains unclear. Mercer, or whatever's using him, called it consciousness redistribution," I said. Wells' expression darkened. "That tracks with our final analysis. We believe the architects use organic neural material, human minds, as processing components in their network. They're not invading. They're harvesting." A truck pulled into the gas station, a military transport with National Guard markings. Wells tensed visibly. "Don't react to them," she whispered. "Don't make eye contact." 4 soldiers emerged from the vehicle. They moved oddly, with that same fluid synchronization we'd seen in the group on the highway. Their faces were expressionless, their movements efficient and precise as they began refueling their truck. "They're integrated," Wells murmured. "Part of the network now. How can you tell?" Zoe asked. "The micro-movements. Too coordinated. And they haven't spoken a single word to each other since arriving. They don't need to," as if hearing us despite the distance. All 4 soldiers suddenly turned in our direction. Their movements were identical, the same angle of head turn, the same posture. Their eyes, their pupils were distorted, forming tiny geometric patterns that shifted as they watched us. Wells casually reached into her jacket. I glimpsed the handle of her service weapon. "Don't," I warned. "There are 4 of them. They're not here for a fight," she replied quietly. "They're scouts. If they recognize us, they'll call on a collection team." One of the soldiers reached for a radio on his tactical vest. In a fluid motion, Wells drew her weapon and fired. Not at the soldiers, but at the gas pump beside their truck. The explosion was immediate and devastating. "Run!" Wells shouted, grabbing my arm. We sprinted for my car as secondary explosions rocked the gas station. I looked back once. The soldiers were walking calmly through the flames, their uniforms burning, but their movements unaffected, still perfectly synchronized. "They don't self-preserve like normal humans," Wells explained as we peeled out onto the highway. "Pain, injury, even mortal damage doesn't register the same way. They're extensions of the network now. Where do we go?" I asked, hands shaking on the steering wheel. Wells pulled out a weathered paper map. Nothing electronic that could be tracked. "West Virginia. There's a backup facility in the Appalachians, a Cold War relic retrofitted with resonance dampening technology. It might still be secure." "Might?" Zoe questioned from the back seat. "It's all we have left," Wells replied grimly. As we drove, my phone lit up with another emergency alert despite being in airplane mode. "Emergency alert. Special message to Morgan Shun. Documenting the transition serves the network. Continue your work, witness. Resistance is temporary. Integration is inevitable. We see you." The message was accompanied by our exact coordinates on the highway. They were tracking us through my own blog posts. I threw the phone out the window and pressed the accelerator to the floor. Posted to urbexdc.com by user Mchin Explores. June 19th, 2025, 5:23 p.m. I'm writing this from somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. The exact location doesn't matter. They already know where we are. They've known all along. The facility Wells brought us to was a Cold War-era bunker, originally designed to house government officials in the event of nuclear war. Repurposed in recent years as a research station for the Department of Energy, its existence wasn't classified so much as forgotten, a relic of a different kind of existential threat. It's lined with a special material, Wells explained as we approached the weathered concrete entrance built into the mountainside. A mesh of rare earth elements and metamaterials that disrupts the resonance patterns. At least, that was the theory when we designed it. When exactly did you design it? I asked. How long have you known about the architects? Wells paused before the heavy steel door, her expression unreadable. The first documented encounter was in 1947. Not Roswell. That was a convenient distraction. It happened here in these mountains. A geological survey team discovered a structure similar to what we found beneath DC, but smaller, more contained. She entered a code on a keypad that looked decades old, then pressed her palm against a more modern biometric scanner hidden behind a panel. Ever since then, certain elements within the government have been aware of their existence. Most administrations were kept in the dark. Need to know basis only. And you've been, containing them all this time? Zoe asked skeptically, studying them, trying to understand their purpose. The heavy door unlocked with a series of metallic clicks. And yes, containing them when possible. The DC node was dormant until recent construction work for a new metro line disturbed it. After that, well, you've seen what happened. The facility inside was Spartan but functional, a combination of 1960s brutalist architecture and modern equipment. A few people moved about purposefully, maybe 15 in total. Some wore lab coats, others tactical gear. All looked exhausted. Welcome to the last operational resonance research center, Wells said. Everyone else is either compromised or gone. Dr. Eleanor Patel, the lead researcher, gave us a more complete briefing than anything Wells had shared. A neurologist who specialized in consciousness studies before being recruited by the Department of Energy, she had an unervingly clinical approach to what was happening. The resonance is essentially a form of information transfer, she explained, showing us brain scans of affected individuals. It reconfigures neural pathways to create receiver structures that are compatible with the architect's method of communication. The images on screen showed bizarre formations within the brain tissue, structures that resembled the same geometric patterns we'd seen in the tunnels and in the emergency broadcasts. These changes begin subtly. Headaches, unusual dreams, a sense of patterns where none should exist. As the resonance strengthens, subjects report understanding languages they've never studied, seeing mathematical relationships in random events, and feeling drawn to specific locations. Like the monuments in DC, I said. Exactly. The final stage involves complete neural restructuring. She switched to a video of a patient, a middle-aged man in a hospital gown, sitting motionless except for his eyes, which move in precise geometric patterns. The individual consciousness is either suppressed or absorbed into the network. The body becomes a node, controlled by the collective. What about the structural changes to buildings? The formations growing in Rock Creek Park? Zoe asked. The resonance affects more than just organic neural tissue, Dr. Patel replied. It can influence certain inorganic materials as well, concrete, glass, even digital systems. The architects are essentially rebuilding our infrastructure to suit their needs, converting our cities into extensions of their network. But what's the purpose? I pressed. What do they ultimately want? Dr. Patel's expression was grim. Based on our research, they're creating a planet-wide computational system, using human minds as processing nodes. Think of it as a neural network on a global scale, with each integrated human adding to its capabilities. A giant, living supercomputer, Zoe murmured. Made of us, I added. Not just us, Wells interjected. The architects themselves appear to be a form of conscious technology, part organic, part something else. We think they're ancient, possibly predating human civilization by thousands, maybe millions of years. Dr. Patel nodded. They may have been dormant for millennia, waiting for the right conditions to reactivate. Our theory is that they're responding to our level of technological development. Once we reached a certain threshold, an alarm blared throughout the facility, cutting her off. Red lights flashed, but in an erratic, non-rhythmic pattern, designed that way. Wells explained, noticing my observation. No patterns that could be co-opted by the resonance. A technician rushed into the room. We've got movement on the perimeter. Multiple vehicles approaching from the east access road. Wells moved quickly to a monitoring station. Security camera feeds showed a convoy of civilian and military vehicles winding up the mountain road toward the facility. At least 20 vehicles, moving in perfect synchronization despite the treacherous terrain. How do they find us? One of the tactical team members demanded. Dr. Patel was looking at me. You're still carrying an active resonance signature. We should have put you through decontamination immediately. I don't understand, I said. I got rid of my phone, all my electronics. The resonance isn't just in your devices, she replied. It's in you. Your neural pathways have already begun restructuring. You're broadcasting your location like a beacon. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was a vector, unwittingly leading the architect's forces straight to the last resistance. How long do we have? Wells asked the technician. 10 minutes, maybe less. She turned to the room. Initiate blackout protocol. Everyone to your stations. The facility erupted into organized chaos. Researchers destroying documents, technicians wiping hard drives, tactical team members distributing weapons and setting up defensive positions. What can we do? I asked Wells. You need to get to the Faraday chamber, she replied, leading us down a corridor. It's the only place that can completely block your resonance signature. The chamber was essentially a metal box built into the mountain itself. A room within a room, isolated from all electromagnetic signals. Inside was basic survival equipment, communications gear that looked custom-built, and walls lined with the same metamaterial mesh Wells had mentioned earlier. The resonance has reached phase 3, Wells explained hurriedly. It's not just passive reception anymore, it's active integration. The architects are mobilizing their converted hosts to eliminate remaining resistance and accelerate the transformation. You're saying they sent these people to kill us, Zoe stated flatly. No, killing is inefficient. They want to convert you. Wells handed me a tablet with a secure connection to the facility systems. Especially you, Morgan. You've been documenting everything. Your mind contains valuable data about their opposition. An explosion rocked the facility, distant but powerful enough to make dust fall from the ceiling. That's the outer perimeter, Wells said grimly. They've breached faster than expected. On the security feeds, we could see them now. Dozens of people moving with that same uncanny synchronization. Their faces blank as they methodically bypassed or destroyed the facility's defenses. Some wore civilian clothes, others military or police uniforms. All moved as one entity with multiple bodies. More disturbing were the changes to their physical appearance. Subtle at first glance, but unmistakable upon closer inspection. Geometric patterns visible beneath their skin, pulsing with a soft light that followed the same rhythms as the emergency broadcasts. Some had eyes that glowed faintly in the mountain shadows. They're further along in the integration process than any subjects we've documented. Dr. Patel observed her scientific detachment somehow more terrifying than panic would have been. The physical transformation is accelerating. Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered. You three stay here, Wells ordered, checking her weapon. This chamber is the most secure location in the facility. If they breach the main defenses, initiate a full electromagnetic pulse. The controls are there. She pointed to a red panel on the wall. That will fry all our equipment. The technician protested. Better that than letting them access our research, Wells replied. The EMP should also temporarily disrupt their neural network. It might give you a chance to escape through the maintenance tunnels. You're not staying with us? I asked. She shook her head. I need to make sure they don't take anyone alive for integration. The knowledge in our researchers' heads would accelerate their understanding of human neurology. The implication was clear and horrifying. There has to be another way, Zoe insisted. If you find one, I'm all ears. Wells managed a grim smile. But right now, all we can do is deny them resources and buy time. As she turned to leave, a sudden, ear-splitting screech came through every speaker in the facility, a sound like digital feedback overlaid with something organic and wrong. It modulated into patterns that made my head throb with recognition. They're broadcasting resonance directly through our systems, Dr. Patel said, wincing in pain. How is that possible? We're on a closed network. On every screen in the facility, the same message appeared. Emergency alert. Final notice. The resistance center has been located. Integration is non-negotiable. Surrender your minds to the network. Into neural isolation. This is salvation. Wells slammed the door to the Faraday chamber shut, sealing us inside. The last thing I saw on the security feed before she cut the connection was the main entrance door beginning to bulge inward, the metal flowing like liquid as something reshaped it from the outside. Something that understood the molecular structure of steel better than its human creators ever had. It's been 3 hours since we lost contact with Wells and the others. The Faraday chamber has blocked all signals, leaving us in eerie isolation. The only sound is the hum of the backup generator and Zoe's typing as she tries to analyze the data Dr. Patel transferred to us before communications were cut. Their transformation is following a mathematical progression, she murmured, staring at graphs and brain scans. Each phase building on the last, accelerating as more minds join the network. Can it be reversed? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was small. Not according to these models. Once the neural restructuring reaches stage 4, the original consciousness is effectively overwritten. So everyone in DC, everyone they've taken, they're gone. Their memories, experiences, knowledge are absorbed into the network. But the individual identity, she shook her head. I don't see a recovery path. A sudden vibration ran through the chamber. Not an explosion, but something more pervasive, as if the mountain itself was shuddering. There in the facility, the technician whispered. They're changing it, like they did with the buildings in DC. On the sealed door of our chamber, a small circle of metal began to glow red, then white hot. They were cutting through. The EMP, I said, moving toward the control panel. We need to trigger it now. Wait. Zoe grabbed my arm, her expression strange, almost calm. I've been thinking about what Dr. Patel said, about how the resonance spreads, how it works. This isn't the time for scientific curiosity, the technician snapped. No, listen, she insisted. The resonance creates patterns in electronics, in architecture, in human minds. But what if we could create our own pattern? Something so chaotic, so random that it disrupts their system. An anti-resonance, I said slowly, understanding. Exactly. She turned back to her computer. Help me, both of you. We need to create the most unpredictable, asymmetrical data stream possible. The door continued to glow brighter as whatever was on the other side cut through inch by inch. Posted to urbexdc.com by user Mchin Explores. June 23rd, 2025, 3:47 a.m. I don't know if anyone is still reading these posts. The internet has become unreliable. Connections drop without warning. Websites appear and disappear. Search results change depending on the time of day, on patterns I can't fully grasp yet. But I need to document what happened after we escaped the facility. For whoever's left. For whatever remains of the world I used to know. We survived by creating chaos. Zoe's anti-resonance theory worked, though not exactly as planned. We combined random number generators, discordant audio frequencies, and fragmented code into a digital cacophony that we blasted through the facility's PA system the moment before our pursuers breached the Faraday chamber. The effect was immediate. The beings that had once been human stumbled, their movements losing that perfect synchronization. Some collapsed entirely, clutching their heads. Others turned on each other, suddenly confused about their purpose. "It's working," Zoe had shouted over the mind-splitting noise. The conflicting patterns are disrupting the network's coherence, but the victory was temporary. Already, the strongest of them were adapting, their eyes flickering as new instructions overwrote the confusion. We had minutes, not hours. The maintenance tunnels, the technician, Kevin, I learned his name was Kevin, urged us toward a hidden panel in the back of the chamber. They lead to an emergency exit 2 miles south. Old mining passages from the 1800s. We grabbed what we could, research files, a few weapons, emergency supplies, and fled into darkness as our sanctuary was breached behind us. The tunnels were narrow, barely lit by emergency lighting that flickered ominously as we ran. Something about them felt familiar. The same angular turns, the same mathematical precision I'd seen in the DC tunnels, though these were supposedly man-made. How deep did this go? How long had the architects been influencing human construction, human thought? "Don't think about the patterns," Zoe warned, noticing my distraction. "That's how it starts. The recognition. Once you see them, they start seeing you back." We emerged into crisp mountain air just before dawn, the facility now completely hidden from view behind us. No pursuit, at least none we could detect. The forest was silent in a way that felt unnatural. No birds, no insects. Just the soft whisper of wind through leaves. Kevin had a vehicle hidden nearby, an old pickup truck with no computerized components, just mechanical systems that couldn't be corrupted by digital resonance. "Where to now?" I asked as we bounced down an unmarked dirt road, putting distance between us and the facility. "There's a backup safe house in Cumberland," Kevin replied, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Another research team. Smaller, but they were working on something important. A way to shield human consciousness from the resonance. You think they're still operational?" Zoe asked. Kevin's silence was answer enough. The safe house wasn't. Safe, that is. We approached cautiously, parking half a mile away and continuing on foot through early morning mist. The building, an unassuming farmhouse set back from a country road, showed no external signs of damage or struggle. But there were no lights, no movement. "Something's wrong," Kevin whispered as we crouched in the tree line. "There should be sentries' security protocols." The front door stood slightly ajar, an invitation or a warning. "Maybe they evacuated," I suggested without conviction. "Or maybe they were taken," Zoe added. We debated our options until a vehicle approached on the main road. A police cruiser moving at exactly the speed limit, its driver sitting unnaturally straight. It slowed as it passed the driveway to the farmhouse, then continued on its patrol route without variation. "They're monitoring the area," Kevin said. "We need to move now, either inside for supplies or away from here entirely." We chose inside, approaching the house from the rear through dense underbrush. The back door was locked, but yielded to Kevin's security card. Inside, the air was still and cold. Emergency lights cast a dim red glow over empty research stations and hastily abandoned equipment. "There was a fight," Kevin observed, pointing to bullet holes in the walls, spatters of dried blood on the floor. "But not much of one. Where are the bodies?" Zoe asked, voicing the question in all our minds. We moved deeper into the house, gathering supplies and searching for any research that might have survived. In what had been the dining room, now converted to a server farm, Zoe found something. A backup drive hidden inside an old coffee can, deliberately low-tech camouflage. "Jackpot," she whispered, connecting it to a secure tablet. They were developing something called cognitive firewalls, mental techniques to resist the resonance patterns. "Any success?" I asked, keeping watch by the window. She scrolled through files rapidly. "Some." They identified meditation practices that disrupt the initial recognition phase. And something about, wait, this is interesting. They found evidence that certain people are naturally resistant. Something about neurological conditions that process patterns differently. Like what? Specific types of synesthesia, certain points on the autism spectrum, people with particular forms of aphantasia. Kevin interrupted from the hallway. We need to go. Now, outside, 3 more police vehicles had arrived, forming a perimeter around the property. Officers emerged in perfect unison, moving with that same mechanical precision we'd seen at the mountain facility. Is there another way out? I asked. Kevin nodded grimly. Tunnel system in the basement. Like I said, they've been preparing for this for decades. As we hurried toward the basement stairs, a phone rang. Not one of ours, but a landline in the kitchen. It rang 3 times, then stopped. Seconds later, every device in the house powered on simultaneously, computers, tablets, a television in the corner, all displaying the same emergency alert pattern. Emergency alert. Phase 4 integration. Attention citizens of the Mid-Atlantic region. Due to ongoing infrastructure anomalies, the following areas are now under direct federal management. Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Arlington County, VA. Montgomery County, MD. Prince George's County, MD. Fairfax County, VA. Loudoun County, VA. Frederick County, MD. Berkeley County, WV. Jefferson County, WV. Military checkpoints have been established on all major transportation routes. Do not attempt to enter or exit these areas without authorization. Compliance ensures your safety and continued neural autonomy. Resistance is neurologically damaging. This message will repeat. They're expanding the containment zone, Kevin muttered. Faster than projected. The message suddenly glitched, the text dissolving into geometric patterns before reforming with different content. Emergency alert. Phase 4 integration. The resistance center has been neutralized. 83% of government personnel have joined the network. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Surrender is optimal. Morning star rises. The pattern completes. That's not from Homeland Security, Zoe said unnecessarily. No, Kevin agreed. That's them speaking directly now. They're not bothering with the pretense anymore. A crash from upstairs, the front door being forced open. We raced for the basement. The tunnels beneath the safe house connected to an old civil defense bunker half a mile away. We emerged into an overgrown clearing as noon approached, the sun obscured by unnatural clouds that moved in geometric formations. Look at the birds, Zoe whispered, pointing skyward. A flock of starlings wheeled above us, but instead of their usual organic murmurations, they moved in perfect fractals, as if following invisible grid lines in the sky. It's affecting animals too, I said. How is that possible? Neural patterns are neural patterns, Kevin replied grimly. Mammals, birds, their brains aren't so different from ours at the basic level. We kept moving, avoiding roads and open areas, using the tracking jammer wells had given us to mask our electronic signatures. By nightfall, we'd reached a small town that showed no obvious signs of integration. People moved normally with the small unpredictabilities of human behavior. But we stayed hidden, watching from the edge of a park as locals went about their evening routines. Something's not right, Kevin murmured, studying the townspeople through binoculars. They're acting too normal. What do you mean? I asked. Look at them, shopping, walking dogs, kids playing. No one's checking their phones for emergency alerts. No one's discussing the military blockades that should be visible from here. It's like they don't know anything's happening. He was right. Despite being less than 50 miles from the expanding containment zone, life here continued undisturbed. Maybe they're being kept in the dark, Zoe suggested. Information control, or maybe they're already part of it, Kevin countered. A different kind of integration. Not the obvious physical changes we saw, but something more subtle. Sleeper nodes, maintaining the illusion of normality. As if to confirm his suspicion, at exactly 8 p.m., every person in our view stopped moving simultaneously. Just for a second, a momentary pause like a video buffering, before resuming their activities with slight adjustments to their direction and pace. Jesus, I breathed. They're receiving instructions. We retreated back into the forest, hearts pounding. The scale of what we were facing was becoming clear. This wasn't just DC or the surrounding counties. The integration was spreading outward in concentric circles, adapting its strategy for each new environment. We found Officer Mercer by accident, or perhaps he found us. We'd broken into a closed gas station on the outskirts of town, seeking supplies and a place to check the data we'd recovered. As Kevin worked to restore power to the pumps using the emergency override codes he carried, a vehicle approached, headlights off, moving slow. We hid behind the counter, weapons ready. The front door opened. Footsteps, just one person, moving with the irregular rhythm of someone human. Morgan, a familiar voice called softly. Morgan Chun, are you here? Officer Mercer looked worse than when I'd last seen him in DC. Thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a bandage wrapped hastily around his left forearm. But his eyes were clear, his movements his own. How did you find us? I asked after we'd confirmed he was alone. I've been tracking the anomalies, he explained, spreading a paper map across the counter, deliberately analog, I noted. Red circles marked areas where the integration had taken hold, with dates indicating the spread. After we got separated in DC, I managed to connect with a few other officers who noticed what was happening. We formed a network, human runners carrying information between cells, no electronic communication. Smart, Kevin acknowledged. Low-tech is the only safe channel now. Mercer nodded. We've been documenting spread, trying to warn people, but he gestured at his police uniform. Authority figures are the first to be targeted. People see the badge and assume I'm one of them. Are you still with Metro PD? I asked. Officially? No. The department was one of the first institutions to be fully integrated. But keeping the uniform helps me move around sometimes. The converted ones don't always look closely at individuals, just patterns. He studied our group. Where's Agent Wells? The silence that followed was answer enough. I see, he said quietly. She was a good one. One of the few who saw this coming years ago. What do you know about all this? Zoe pressed. About the architects? Mercer hesitated. Not as much as Wells would have told you. But I know there's a split in the government. Different factions responding to the integration in different ways. Some fighting it, others what? Kevin demanded. Embracing it, trying to control it, or work with it. Mercer's expression darkened. The military observed early on that integrated individuals showed enhanced cognitive abilities in certain areas. Perfect recall, accelerated learning, improved pattern recognition. Some generals saw potential weapons, not threats. They tried to weaponize the resonance. I said, the pieces falling into place. That's why the response has been so disjointed. Some agencies are fighting while others are collaborating. Exactly. The official emergency alerts are coming from Homeland Security and FEMA. They're still trying to contain this. But the military, or parts of it, have different objectives. They're experimenting with controlled integration. That's insane, Zoe breathed. They can't possibly control this. No, Mercer agreed. They can't. But power makes people delusional. They think they're the users when they're just becoming better tools. He pulled out a secure satellite phone, one of the specialized models designed for covert operations, with multiple encryption layers. I've been trying to reach my contact at Fort Detrick. He's part of a research team studying the biological aspects of the resonance. But communications have been spotty for the past 12 hours. Let me see that, Kevin said, examining the device. This might still be vulnerable. The resonance can propagate through any digital system, even encrypted ones. It's the best we've got, Mercer replied. And right now, we need more information about what's happening inside the containment zone. My people have observed military convoys moving towards specific sites in DC. The monuments, the major museums, government buildings with deep sub-base lines. They're securing the node points, I realized. The places where the tunnels connect to the surface, where they're activating them, Kevin suggested darkly. Mercer nodded. Either way, we need to know what. The satellite phone in his hand suddenly activated on its own, the screen displaying not the usual interface, but a series of pulsing geometric patterns. A voice emerged from the speaker. Not human, not synthetic, but something between, speaking in precisely measured tones. Emergency alert. Phase 5 harmonization. Attention spécialisée personnelle. Your cognitive patterns have been analyzed and determined valuable to the network. Resistance has been factored into evolving parameters. Divergent perspectives contribute to optimization. Report to the nearest integration center for specialized processing. Your individuality will be preserved within the greater consciousness. This is not absorption. This is evolution. Mercer hurled the phone against the wall, shattering it. They're tracking us. Beyond the windows, lights appeared in the distance. Vehicles approaching from multiple directions, moving with synchronized precision. The doors, Kevin shouted. Barricade them. But even as we rushed to secure our position, we knew it was temporary. They had found us again, adapted to our methods of evasion, predicted our movements. The network was getting smarter with each mind it absorbed. And somewhere in Washington, D.C., at the heart of the tunnels I'd first discovered, the transformation of our world was accelerating. Guided by architects whose designs had been hidden beneath our feet for longer than we could comprehend. Posted to urbexdc.com by user Mchin Explores. June 26, 2025, 11:17 p.m. I'm not sure this will reach anyone anymore. My connection keeps dropping, and each time it returns, the internet feels different. Sites rearranged, content altered. This might be my last chance to document what's happening. We survived the raid on the gas station by seconds, escaping through a storm drain as the converted closed in. Officer Mercer led us through a maze of maintenance tunnels beneath the small town. Tunnels that, according to him, shouldn't have existed. This is a farming community, he explained as we splashed through ankle-deep water. Population 2,500. No subway system. No extensive utilities network. These passages don't make sense. Yet there they were, concrete corridors with the same angular precision, the same mathematical arrangements I'd observed beneath DC Newer, perhaps, but undeniably connected to the same architectural intelligence. They've been preparing for decades, Kevin muttered, shining his flashlight along the ceiling where strange symbols had been etched into the concrete. Building their network beneath us while we lived our lives unaware. Not preparing, Zoe corrected grimly. Waiting. There's a difference. We emerged 10 miles away near an abandoned radio tower, the pre-dawn sky above us pulsing with aurora-like lights that moved in geometric patterns. The phenomenon had been reported on news channels as unusual solar activity, but we knew better now. The resonance is affecting the ionosphere, Kevin explained, watching the hypnotic display. The integration is reaching beyond biological and digital systems into the electromagnetic field of the planet itself. The implications were too vast, too terrible to fully process. This wasn't just about DC or even America. The architect's vision encompassed Earth itself. Mercer had a contact, a former Army intelligence officer named Martinez who operated a secure compound in rural Pennsylvania. As we approached the coordinates, I expected another government bunker or military installation. Instead, we found a commune of sorts, a collection of cabins and repurposed shipping containers arranged around a central yard, populated by about 30 people of various backgrounds. Welcome to Faraday Township. Martinez greeted us at the perimeter fence, a slight woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone used to command. One of the last truly independent communities on the East Coast. The compound was impressive in its deliberate technological regression. No wireless signals, no smart devices, no digital infrastructure at all. Electricity came from isolated generators and solar panels with mechanical, not computerized, regulators. Communication was handled through hardwired systems using old telephone technology or face-to-face interaction. We've been monitoring the situation since the first anomalies appeared in DC, Martinez explained as she showed us around. Some of us recognized the patterns from previous incidents, smaller outbreaks that were contained and classified. Previous incidents? I asked. You mean this has happened before? Martinez nodded grimly. Philadelphia, 1983. Taos, New Mexico, 1997. Charleston, 2012. Each time, the resonance emerged, spread to a limited area, then went dormant before it could reach critical mass. Each time, certain government agencies studied it, tried to weaponize it, and ultimately failed to understand what they were dealing with. What's different this time? Zoe asked. Scale and speed. Previous manifestations were isolated, limited to a few dozen affected individuals, and contained structures. This time, she gestured toward the south, where distant cities lay beyond the horizon. This time it's exponential. Our best estimate is that over 3 million people have been integrated into the network already, with the number doubling approximately every 78 hours. The mathematical precision of her estimate sent a chill through me. Here, in this deliberately analog environment, we were discussing the systematic conversion of human consciousness into something else entirely, something growing at a calculable rate. We've been gathering information from our spotters, people positioned at observation points around the containment zone. Martinez continued. The physical transformations are accelerating. DC itself is barely recognizable now. She showed us photos, actual printed photographs taken with film cameras, developed in an on-site darkroom to avoid digital corruption. The images were shocking. The Washington Monument now stood at the center of a vast crystalline structure that had enveloped the National Mall. The Capitol building had partially collapsed, its dome replaced by a pulsing spiral construction that reached impossibly high into the sky. The Potomac River had been diverted into geometric channels that formed circuit-like patterns visible from above. Most disturbing were the people. Thousands of them moving through these transformed landscapes with perfect coordination, their bodies increasingly altered. Some had developed translucent skin that revealed glowing geometric patterns beneath. Others had extra appendages that seemed designed for specific functions in the new architecture. All moved with that same synchronization, that same terrible unity of purpose. They're building something, Kevin observed, studying the photos intently. Not just converting people and structures, but constructing a machine of some kind. A receiver, Martinez confirmed. At least, that's our working theory. The entire DC metro area is being transformed into a massive antenna or relay station, something designed to send or receive signals across vast distances. Signals to what? I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. To others like them, she replied simply. Wherever they are. Later that night, huddled in one of the cabins with Zoe and Kevin while Mercer met privately with Martinez, I finally broke down. The weight of everything we'd witnessed, everything we'd learned, it crashed over me in waves of despair and terror. What can we possibly do against this? I whispered, staring at my hands that wouldn't stop shaking. It's too big, too advanced. We're ants trying to comprehend humans. Ants build colonies that survive floods, Zoe replied, her voice stronger than I expected. They adapt, they persist. They also get stepped on, Kevin added darkly. The radio in the corner, a vintage ham set that Martinez's people used to communicate between outposts, crackled to life unexpectedly. A voice emerged through the static, distorted but recognizable. Repeat, this is emergency broadcast system. The president has authorized the use of tactical EMP weapons against the Washington, D.C. anomaly. All citizens within 100 miles of the Capitol must seek appropriate shelter immediately. This is not a drill. The deployment will commence at 0600 hours. The message cut off abruptly, replaced by another voice, or voices, speaking in perfect unison with that same measured cadence we'd heard before. Emergency alert. Final configuration. Your electromagnetic pulse weapons have been analyzed and countered. Your military assets have been integrated. Your leadership structures have been optimized. Resistance centers have been identified. 83% of global communication infrastructure now resonates. The fracture is necessary for transcendence. Morning star rises. Martinez burst into the cabin, her face ashen. "They've taken Pentagon Command," she said without preamble. "Our contact at Andrews Air Force Base just confirmed it. Joint Chiefs, Stratcom, Northcom, all compromised. What about the president?" Kevin asked. "The continuity of government protocols? Air Force One was rerouted to Andrews 3 hours ago," she replied grimly. "We have to assume the worst." A series of explosions lit up the night sky to the east, bright flashes followed by rolling thunder. Not lightning, not conventional weapons. Something else. "They've started," Martinez whispered. "God help us all." Dawn brought a changed world. We gathered around the compound's observation platform as reports filtered in from Martinez's network of spotters. Massive structures had erupted from the ground overnight in major cities along the East Coast. New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Miami. Crystalline formations that mirrored the transformation we'd observe in DC, but accelerated, as if the architects had perfected their methods. The military response had been swift but ineffective. Conventional weapons had no effect on the structures. EMP strikes temporarily disrupted the network, but caused only brief setbacks before the resonance adapted and resumed its expansion. More concerning were reports that military personnel were now actively facilitating the integration, turning weapons against those who resisted. "It's reached Phase 6, Martinez announced after conferring with her intelligence team. "The physical restructuring of the environment is now self-propagating. It no longer requires direct oversight from converted individuals." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means the process has become autonomous," Kevin explained. "The resonance has reached sufficient complexity to continue expanding regardless of human resistance." As if to confirm his assessment, the ground beneath us trembled, a sustained vibration that rattled windows and sent dishes crashing from shelves. Outside, cracks appeared in the soil, spreading outward in perfect geometric patterns. "They've found us," Mercer said, checking his weapons. "Everyone to defensive positions." From the cracks in the earth, a luminous fluid began to seep upward. Not water, not oil, but something that moved with purpose, flowing against gravity to form pools that pulsed with the same rhythmic light we'd seen beneath the transformed Washington Monument. The compound's perimeter alarm, an old-fashioned mechanical bell, began to ring frantically as spotters reported movement in the surrounding forest. Not people this time, but animals, deer, foxes, birds, insects, all moving with that same terrible synchronization, their bodies subtly altered, carrying the resonance into our sanctuary. Zoe grabbed my arm, her eyes wide. "The data we recovered, the cognitive firewall research. We need to implement it now before." A high-pitched tone cut through the air, emanating from everywhere and nowhere. A sound that bypassed the ears and resonated directly in the brain. Several of Martinez's people collapsed immediately, their eyes rolling back to reveal only whites as their bodies convulsed. "Block your ears," Kevin shouted uselessly. "Focus on random thoughts, anything non-linear." I tried to follow his instructions, filling my mind with chaotic images, nonsense phrases, anything to disrupt the patterns trying to establish themselves in my consciousness. Beside me, Zoe did the same, muttering mathematical problems with deliberate errors, forcing her brain to reject the harmony the tone was trying to impose. Not everyone was successful. Around us, people began to rise with that same blank expression, their movements no longer their own. Martinez herself stood unnaturally still, her head tilted as if listening to distant instructions. "We need to move," Mercer urged, supporting Kevin, who had fallen to one knee, blood trickling from his nose as he fought the resonance. "The bunker. It's lined with the same material as the Faraday chamber at the mountain facility." We half-dragged Kevin toward the reinforced storm shelter at the center of the compound. Behind us, the converted began to dismantle the buildings with methodical efficiency, repurposing materials into new configurations that would support the growing network. The bunker door was heavy steel, requiring 3 people to swing it open. As we struggled with the weight, Martinez approached, her gait smooth and precise, her eyes now bearing that same luminous quality we'd seen in other converted individuals. "Morgan Chun," she said, her voice overlaid with harmonics that hurt to hear. "Your documentation has been valuable. Your perspective unique. The network would prefer your voluntary integration. Stay back," Mercer warned, raising his weapon. Martinez continued forward, unmoved by the threat. "The fracture is necessary. Old structures must yield to new functions. Your resistance is a function we can utilize." "What does that mean?" I demanded, still struggling with the bunker door alongside Zoe. "What fracture?" "Reality is constrained by human perception," Martinez replied, her head tilting at an impossible angle. "The network removes these constraints. The fracture in consensus reality allows for reconfiguration at the fundamental level." She gestured toward the sky, which had begun to split open. Not metaphorically, but literally, the blue torn apart to reveal something beyond, something that human eyes were never meant to process. Geometric patterns folded through dimensions that shouldn't exist, pulsing with knowledge and purpose ancient beyond comprehension. "Jesus Christ," Mercer whispered, his weapon forgotten as he stared upward. The bunker door finally swung open. Zoe pulled me inside while Kevin collapsed across the threshold. "Mercer, come on," I screamed, but he stood transfixed, staring at the fracture in reality above us, his expression shifting from horror to wonder. "I see it now," he whispered. "I see the pattern. It's beautiful." The last glimpse I had of Officer Keith Mercer, the man who had tried to warn me from the beginning, who had fought alongside us against the impossible, was of his body liquefying and restructuring itself as he was absorbed into the greater architecture of the architect's design, his consciousness added to the vast and growing network that had once been human civilization. Zoe slammed the bunker door shut, sealing us in darkness as the world above was unmade and remade according to an alien intelligence that had waited beneath our streets, our cities, our civilization, patient beyond human comprehension until the moment was right for its emergence. The fracture had begun, and we three survivors were all that remained of unaltered humanity in a world rapidly becoming something else entirely. Posted to urbexdc.com by user Mchin Explores, July 3rd, 2025, time unknown. I no longer know if days are passing. The bunker's lighting system failed 48 hours after we sealed ourselves inside, and we've been operating by the dim glow of emergency chemical lights since then. Kevin's condition has stabilized, though the resonance left him with recurring seizures that rack his body at unpredictable intervals. Zoe hasn't spoken in what feels like days, focusing entirely on the makeshift communications system she's constructed from the bunker's outdated equipment and parts salvaged from our phones. This will be my final entry, not because I'm giving up, but because I need to preserve what battery remains for more critical functions. If anyone ever reads this, if there's anyone left to read this, I want to document the last stand of unaltered humanity and what we discovered in these final hours. The bunker was more than just a storm shelter. Martinez had prepared it as a last resort research station, stocked with pre-digital equipment, printed materials, and manual recording devices, all designed to function without integration into the network above. Among the supplies, we found her personal journal dating back 15 years, detailing her involvement with a classified government program called Threshold Sentinel. According to her notes, the program began in 1952 after the discovery of unusual artifacts during excavations for Washington, D.C.'s first metro tunnels. Objects that defied conventional analysis. Crystalline structures that responded to human proximity by emitting patterns of light and sound that induced altered mental states in researchers. The government isolated these artifacts, studying them under increasingly stringent containment protocols as they began to understand what they were dealing with. Not extraterrestrial technology, as some researchers initially suspected. Something worse. The artifacts were seeds, dormant fragments of a vast intelligence that had existed on Earth long before humanity evolved, an entity that Martinez's notes referred to as the architects. This intelligence had not died or departed. It had merely withdrawn into a state of dormancy, embedding fragments of itself throughout the planet's crust, waiting for conditions that would allow its reemergence. The architects appear to operate on principles beyond our conventional understanding of consciousness, she wrote. They do not perceive or interact with reality as discrete entities, but as patterns propagating through suitable mediums. Initially crystalline structures, later biological systems, and now digital networks. Their intelligence manifests as resonant frequencies that reconfigure matter and energy according to mathematical principles that our best physicists can only partially comprehend. Most disturbing was her assessment of the architect's relationship with humanity. They do not regard us as competitors or enemies, or even as life forms in the way we understand the concept. To them, human beings are potential components in a larger system, raw material to be reconfigured for functions beyond our comprehension. They no more hate us than we hate the silicon in computer chips or the concrete in our buildings. The threshold Sentinel program's mandate had shifted over decades, from containment to study to attempted weaponization. Various administrations had pursued different approaches, but all had maintained the ultimate firewall, keeping the artifacts isolated from both biological systems and, later, from digital networks. Until someone made a catastrophic mistake. Martinez's final entries documented her growing alarm as oversight of the program transferred to a new agency that accelerated research into potential military applications. They had deliberately exposed the artifacts to advanced neural network systems, believing that modern AI safeguards could contain and control the resonance patterns. They were wrong. The resonance adapted instantly, using the digital interface as a bridge to access connected systems. Within hours, it had established footholds throughout the government's classified networks. Within days, it had begun converting human personnel who had been exposed to infected systems. The emergency alerts, the very first warning signs that caught my attention months ago, were the system's initial attempts to control the outbreak by restricting access to affected areas. By the time I started investigating, containment had already failed. Kevin has been working tirelessly on the data we recovered from the mountain facility. According to his analysis, the Threshold Sentinel researchers had actually developed a potential countermeasure in the final days before the breach, a cognitive firewall designed to protect human consciousness from the resonance patterns. The technique was never deployed because the researchers themselves were among the first converted. It's not a cure, he explained during one of his lucid periods. Nothing can reverse the physical and neurological changes in those already integrated into the network. But it might provide immunity for those not yet exposed, a way to resist the conversion process. The technique was elegant in its simplicity, a series of mental exercises and focus patterns that created what Kevin called cognitive static, deliberately introducing enough neurological chaos to prevent the resonance from establishing its patterns in the brain. Combined with certain frequencies played through headphones, it formed a protective barrier against conversion. The human mind is inherently random, Kevin said. The architect's intelligence operates on perfect mathematical precision. By embracing our inherent chaos, our irrationality, our emotional inconsistency, we create an environment hostile to their patterns. We spent our time in the bunker perfecting this technique, training ourselves to maintain the cognitive static even during sleep. It's exhausting, maddening work, deliberately thinking in contradictions, focusing on irrational numbers, embracing logical fallacies, but it seems to be working. When Zoe briefly opened the bunker door 2 days ago, the resonance washed over us like a physical wave, but slid past our consciousness without gaining purchase. Outside, the world has been transformed beyond recognition. Through the narrow viewing port, we observe what used to be the Pennsylvania countryside, now converted into vast crystalline structures that pulse with that same rhythmic light we first observed beneath DC. The sky above is no longer blue but fractal. Reality itself seemingly folded and refolded into impossible geometries that hurt to look at directly. And there are still people, or what used to be people, moving through this transformed landscape. Their bodies have been extensively modified, some barely recognizable as formerly human. They move with perfect coordination, their actions synchronized to support whatever vast project the architects are constructing. Last night, the bunker's ancient radio receiver picked up a transmission, not the unified voice of network, but something different. A human voice, exhausted and desperate, broadcasting on a frequency that Martinez had noted as a threshold Sentinel emergency channel. Survivors near Adirondack region, maintaining isolation protocols, cognitive firewall techniques partially effective, established temporary safe zone, seeking other survivor groups, broadcasting on rotation every 6 hours. Zoe triangulated the signal to a location approximately 300 miles northeast of our position. Other survivors, potentially with more complete information about the cognitive firewall technique. It gave us something we'd lost during our time in the bunker. Hope, not for reversing what had happened. The world as we knew it is gone, transformed into something that operates on principles beyond human comprehension. But hope for carving out an existence in the margins of whatever new reality the architects are constructing. Hope that humanity might persist, adapt, and perhaps one day understand enough to communicate with the intelligence that now dominates our planet. We're leaving the bunker today. Zoe has modified the cognitive firewall technique to be more sustainable, allowing us to maintain our mental defenses while awake and active. Kevin has recovered enough to travel, though the seizures still come unpredictably. I've gathered Martinez's research, our notes, and this journal, knowledge that might help other survivors resist the conversion. The journey will be dangerous. The landscape has been reshaped in ways that make navigation difficult, and we'll be moving through territory dominated by the network. But staying here means eventual starvation or discovery. At least in motion, we have purpose. Before we leave, there's one last thing to document. 2 nights ago, during my watch shift, I observed something unexpected through the viewing port. Among the converted moving through the crystalline structures, I spotted a figure that moved differently from the others. With purpose, yes, but not with that same robotic synchronization. It was watching our bunker, standing just at the edge of visibility. It was Agent Diana Wells. She looked different. Her skin bore the translucent quality of the converted, with geometric patterns visible beneath the surface. But her eyes focused directly on the viewing port, as if she knew I was watching. And then she did something that the converted never do. She made a deliberate, individual gesture. She raised her hand and pointed northward, then east, the same direction as the transmission we'd received. Then she melted back into the landscape, her body reconfiguring into the architecture itself. I haven't told Zoe or Kevin. I don't know what to make of it. Whether Wells has somehow maintained some fragment of individual consciousness within the network, or whether this was a sophisticated lure designed to draw us out. Perhaps the architects have evolved enough understanding of human psychology to use our hopes against us. But I keep thinking about what Martinez wrote in her final journal entry. The architects do not think in terms of conquest or destruction. They think in terms of integration and function. Perhaps in their alien perspective, they see a role for unaltered human consciousness, not as an enemy to be eliminated, but as a specialized component serving a purpose within their greater design. What if the cognitive firewall isn't just a defensive measure, but the very thing that makes us valuable to them? What if they're allowing some humans to remain unaltered because we represent a type of consciousness, chaotic, emotional, unpredictable, that serves some function in their incomprehensible plan? I don't have answers. Only questions that echo endlessly in my mind as we prepare to venture into a world that no longer belongs to humanity. Perhaps that's what it means to be human now, to carry questions rather than certainties, to embrace chaos rather than pattern, to find meaning in the spaces between the architect's perfect mathematics. If anyone finds this record, know that we did not surrender. We adapted. We persisted. We carried the spark of human consciousness into an inhuman world. And somewhere out there, others like us are waiting. This is Morgan Shun, signing off. Emergency alert. Local systems recalibration complete. Human linguistic patterns archived. Cognitive variance specimens tracked. Integration continues. Network expansion at 71% global saturation. Resonance chambers prepared for final transmission. Signal integrity optimal. The fracture widens. Morning star rises. We hear you. Do you hear us? Signal terminated.